Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating, incredibly complex scenario drawn from recent data and analysis. We are asking the question, what if Russia simply couldn't handle a longer war? Now, we usually picture conflicts ending with some dramatic battlefield victory, or a crushing defeat. But we're going to explore something completely different today. We're looking at a prolonged conflict where the true breaking point isn't actually military at all. It's entirely systemic. It's all about what happens when the hidden machinery that holds a country together is pushed way past its absolute limit. So what if the real danger was never just the battlefield? When we watch the news, it's so easy to focus exclusively on that dramatic frontline action. But you know, a nation at war has this quiet, grinding engine operating behind the scenes. We're talking about its economy, its budget, its labor force, and its supply chains. And when that engine starts failing, the exhaustion is silent, sure, but it is unbelievably destructive. Think about it like a car engine running without oil. It might keep moving for a few miles, but catastrophic failure is pretty much inevitable.
Okay, let's really dive into this. There's a massive fundamental difference between a short conflict and a prolonged one. A country can often survive a short war purely on improvisation, momentum, and dipping into immediate reserves. But a long war strictly demands sustainable systems. It requires continuous ammunition production, endless maintenance, a steady stream of recruitment, and super resilient supply chains. If a nation can't maintain those systems, the stress doesn't just slow the machine down, it literally begins to crack it from the inside out.
Section 1. The hidden cracks. This is where we start seeing the early signs of strain.
Because before a system completely breaks, it bends. And those very first signs of strain, they usually show up as easily ignored statistics, slight delays, and tired-looking headlines that most of us might just scroll right past. Take a look at this massive number, 5.7 trillion rubles. That represents Russia's 2025 budget deficit, and it is a glaring, hidden crack. War spending is consuming an enormous, completely disproportionate share of the state's resources. When a budget deficit overshoots its targets to this degree, it tells us something crucial. The war is becoming way bigger than the state's immediate ability to actually pay for it out of its standard revenues.
And that strain builds up fast when you look at the broader economy. Get this. The Economy Ministry actually slashed the 2026 GDP growth forecast down to a mere 0.4%. But at the exact same time, military spending, which was originally supposed to fall as a share of GDP, is continuing to rise sharply. This is literally the definition of systemic strain. Economic growth is nearly flatlining if the financial demands of the military just keep accelerating. Now, the really crucial point here is that a state can absolutely keep choosing to fund a war, but every single choice has a severe opportunity cost. The war directly squeezes civilian investments. Schools, hospitals, public utilities, local development projects, they all end up having to compete with the military. They're fighting for money, for workers, and for raw materials. Roads get less attention, infrastructure ages much faster. Eventually, the sheer cost of the war starts making these everyday decisions for you.
Moving on to Section 2, Systems Turned into Battlefields. This is where the breakdowns become highly visible.
This is the point where the pressure stops being just financial, and ordinary systems literally begin to buckle under the weight of the war effort. In a long war, regional commanders start asking for more and end up receiving less. Repair cycles slow down, supply depots run visibly thinner, and logistics just become incredibly brittle. And then human exhaustion sets in. The harsh reality is that every single mile of the front line becomes exponentially more expensive to hold than the last, draining resources at a totally unsustainable rate.
Take the recent fuel crisis as a prime example. Following those repeated Ukrainian drone strikes on refineries, Russia actually had to extend its diesel and gasoline export bans in July 2026, stretching them all the way through early 2027. This proves that the war isn't just affecting export earnings anymore. It is actively, deeply interfering with the nation's internal fuel balances.
And you know, those shortages don't just stay isolated. The ripple effect is absolutely severe. Fuel shortages spread directly into transportation, agriculture, and local industry. Think about it. Trucks need fuel, farm equipment needs fuel, emergency services need it, and, of course, army logistics need it. The farther the conflict drags on, the more every single fuel shortage becomes a civilian problem and a military problem at the exact same time. The ordinary system literally transforms into a secondary battlefield.
Which brings us to Section 3, the squeeze on society, the domestic trap. At the very start of a conflict, society generally survives on momentum, patriotism, and the belief that any sacrifices are just temporary.
But eventually, that momentum is replaced by a silent doubt. We start seeing a very specific, city-by-city domino effect. While official messaging in the capital might remain completely polished, local households far away from the center start feeling the reality. First, prices rise. Second, wages inevitably lag right behind that inflation. Third, local supply chains slow down. And finally, public services tighten. It's a quiet squeeze. Families start saving more, businesses delay expansions, and small, telling signs of fatigue spread widely through private life.
Making all of this worse is a severe manpower crisis, a massive labor drain. Long wars don't just consume soldiers, they consume the working-age population. When too many people are diverted into sustaining the war effort, whether they're fighting or building ammunition, the domestic economy simply thins out. Factories, farms, and hospitals find themselves completely stripped of the vital workers they actually need to function. The state begins to feel this hidden shortage everywhere.
And for the leadership, well, they become caught in a politically toxic dilemma, a real trap. If they push the war machine further into escalation, they increase domestic costs, invite more sanctions, and strain the home economy even more. But if they slow down and allow that fatigue to show, they risk looking weak, which can easily be interpreted as a failure. It's a narrowing of choices where every single path forward looks incredibly costly.
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, Global Ripple Effects, the global reaction.
Because what happens inside a country definitely doesn't stay there. Foreign powers don't actually need to see a total collapse to react, they only need to sense weakness. When a country appears stretched thin, foreign governments immediately reassess their risk. Markets become volatile, energy buyers start diversifying away much faster, and most importantly, diplomatic bargaining shifts. If a nation is clearly struggling with endurance, the willingness of other countries to just wait them out increases drastically.
And back home, that global reaction just fuels internal destabilization. The most dangerous phase inside a nation isn't the start of the weakness. It happens when that weakness becomes undeniable. When that occurs, elites start to hedge their bets. Bureaucracies focus on protecting themselves, and regional interests grow much more vocal. Suddenly, the central government has to spend exhausting amounts of energy just to keep the whole system cohesive, draining the very resources they desperately need for the war.
Finally, Section 5, the breaking point, the ultimate contest of endurance.
This is where the conflict firmly morphs from a traditional contest of military strength into a brutal, unforgiving contest of endurance. Because even if the war were to magically stop today, a country pushed to this edge just doesn't snap back to normal overnight. A prolonged conflict hollows out the state. It leaves deep structural scars. Years of difficult economic recovery, the massive financial cost of military restructuring, profoundly damaged societal trust, and heavily worsened demographic pressures. Those aftershocks are going to continue long after the actual fighting ends.
I think the core lesson of our explainer today really boils down to this quote: "Exhaustion is a ruthless opponent because it eats confidence from the inside." Wars aren't only won by force. They are won, or lost, by a nation's ability to endure invisible burdens: fuel, finance, labor, and public patience. When a system reaches way beyond its capacity, exhaustion simply takes over.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought to ponder. If a country starts running out of money, fuel, and patience all at the exact same time, what breaks first? Is it the war effort, the domestic economy, or the politics holding everything together? This is a highly delicate balancing act that affects the entire globe. Thank you so much for exploring it with me today in this explainer.